Welcome to Sungrand University. Thank you for attending class today. Please have a seat. My name is Jerrel Dulay. I will be your instructor, and today we will analyze a recent software title release, Mixtape. We will compare and contrast it to well-known video games to explain what a video game is, and I will discuss core game design philosophies. These are fundamental concepts for those of you learning game development. There will be homework assigned at the end of the lesson, so I will explain that later. The download link will be in the description. If you wish to take notes, they must be on paper. That is my personal policy. A notebook will be provided, so if you do not have your own paper notebook, grab one from the back of the class. There have been budget cuts, so I pay for these notebooks myself. So if you take one, just trade me some RuneScape gold. So the first topic that we will discuss today is the failure state. What is a failure state? The failure state is the point at which the user is determined to have fulfilled the conditions for failure. There are generally two levels to failure states. The first is a minor failure state, and the second is a major. Some games forego the minor failure state. Consider the game Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System. A minor failure state would be encountering an enemy and getting hit by an enemy. If the player has a power-up, they will shrink and become Tiny Mario. If they have no power-up, they will be defeated, they will lose one life, and they will return to either the start of the level or a checkpoint. And this is a penalty. It is a minor failure to get hit by an enemy, and to lose a life is a minor failure state. To run out of lives, if the player takes a hit, falls down a pit, they have no extra lives left, and they reach the game over screen, this is the major failure state. The victory state is the point at which the user is determined to have fulfilled the conditions for victory. There are two stages to this as well, a minor victory and a major victory. Let us consider Final Fantasy VII for the Sony PlayStation. A minor victory would be defeating enemies and completing a battle. A major victory would be completing a story arc and moving on to the next section of the plot. In the case of Super Mario Bros., a minor victory would be surviving an enemy encounter by either avoiding of or dispatching an enemy. Let's now consider something very vital to the experience of a video game, and this is the value of input. How much do the player's mechanical inputs contribute to affecting the outcome of fulfilling the requirements for either the failure state or the victory state? Do the player's inputs on the controller actually affect the outcome? And if so, how much do they impact the outcome? That is the value of input. Next, we will discuss the value of visuals. How much does the visual feedback of the software title contribute to informing the user to make decisions that allow them to fulfill the conditions necessary to avoid the failure state and reach the victory state? In rare cases, for some games, we also have value of audio, but that is not that often. So what is most important for games in general are two things: the value of input and the value of visuals. And sometimes there is value of audio when it comes to contributing to whether or not you reach the victory state. Let's take a look at a game such as Dance Dance Revolution, Step Mania, and Rock Band. I would like you to identify what is the value of input for a music and rhythm-based game. Is the value of input high or is it low? For music rhythm games, the important mechanical engagement, which we will discuss later, is for the player to press the buttons. This allows the player to reach either the failure state or the victory state. What is the value of visuals for rhythm-based games? Is the value of visuals high or is it low? I would like you to consider and answer what will happen during music rhythm games if you happen to stop pressing buttons on the controller. In Dance Dance Revolution, in Step Mania, in Rock Band, what will happen if you stop pressing buttons on the controller? What will happen if you look away from the screen during gameplay? Will looking away from the screen impact your ability to reach the victory state or the failure state? In the case of music rhythm games, you cannot afford to look away from the screen. So the value of visuals is very high. You must see what is on the screen in order to make informed decisions that allow you to reach the victory state, and you must press buttons in order to reach the victory state and avoid the failure state. Let's analyze Mixtape. What is the value of visuals in Mixtape? And this has nothing to do with visual fidelity. It doesn't matter how fancy, how pretty the colors are, how dense the details in the environment are. That does not contribute to the value of visuals. How do the value of visuals affect the player's ability to make informed decisions to reach either the failure state or the victory state? What is the value of input? If the player stopped pressing buttons, will they reach the failure state? In the case of Mixtape, you don't have a high value of visuals. You can look away from the screen, you can walk away from the game, and the game will progress as intended, as expected. You will still reach what is considered to be the victory state, which isn't really existent in this title. It just has a linear flow. What are the value of input in Mixtape? If the player were to put the controller down and stop pressing, the software title will still continue to proceed in a linear fashion. There are only very superficial moments where the player is expected to press a button prompt, but that is linear and it does not actually contribute to whether or not the player reaches a failure state or victory state. Let's next discuss engagement, and this is extremely important. I hope you are taking notes. I did see some of you grab notebooks back there, so I'm expecting to see some RuneScape gold in my account later on. There are two types of engagement that are most important to consider with a game. There is also a third, which we will discuss later, that generally is not that important. The first type of engagement we will discuss is intellectual engagement. What does the user think? It is the visuals and the audio of the software title that interact with intellectual engagement. They elicit intellectual engagement. They allow the player to think about the game. What is the user thinking about the game? What are they thinking about the current state of the game? How does the player plan out their next inputs? The next type of engagement that we will discuss is mechanical engagement. What does the user physically do to interact with the game? Does the player step on a dance pad? Does the player turn a steering wheel? Does the player press buttons in time with the music? This is mechanical engagement, and it must be defined and understood on a deeper level by developers that are planning their games. Let's consider a game like Street Fighter. In Street Fighter, what does the user physically do to interact with the game? They do down, down, forward, forward, punch. And if you repeat this, in general, you can spam and win through the use of fireballs if the other player is not that experienced. In the case of Super Smash Bros., what does the user physically do to interact with the game? They basically pick a character where they can mash the B button and win. In some cases, maybe they'll just pick Zelda and side B and neutral B, and that is how you physically interact with Super Smash Bros. Let us consider the rules of our software title, and the difference between a software title and a game is that games have rules, and it is important for the developers to establish the rules and to explain the rules in an organic way that the user is able to understand. When it comes to the rules, the game must explain what is the user able to do. What actions can they perform? What mechanical freedom do they have within the context of the game? What is the user expected to do? And what is the penalty for failing to follow the rules? What is the reward for following the rules and fulfilling the conditions for victory? So again, let us examine the case of Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo Entertainment System. The rules are: do not fall down a pit, do not get hit by enemies, or do not get hit by enemy projectiles. Consider the penalty for failing to follow the rules. As we discussed earlier in the lesson, we have minor failure states and major failure states. There are rules that dictate the player must reach the flagpole at the end of the level, and that is one of the conditions for reaching the victory state. The reward for following that rule is, in the case of some Mario games, a firework is displayed, there is a playing of victory music, and there is progression to the next level. This is a major victory. Let's again take a look at rhythm-based games, such as Dance Dance Revolution, Step Mania, Rock Band, et al. The game's rules and objectives require the player to press the correct buttons at the correct time to reach the victory state. What is the penalty for pressing the wrong button? What is the penalty for pressing the right button but too late or too soon? The player will earn points, or they will have their combo increased for pressing the right buttons at the right time. Or if the button is not pressed at the right time, the player loses their combo, thus inhibiting their ability to earn a fully sick score. What is the level of intellectual engagement for a game like Rock Band or Dance Dance Revolution? What kind of thinking must the player do in order to engage with the product and reach the victory state? What must they understand about not just the game itself, but the current state that the game is in order to succeed? And what mechanical engagements must the player perform to reach the victory state? This is what makes a game fun. People thinking about the game, understanding it, and then being rewarded for not just understanding the rules of the game, but for playing by the rules and understanding the current state of the game and performing mechanical inputs which allow them to fulfill victory conditions. This is what makes games fulfilling and fun. Let's analyze Mixtape, and I would like to hear from you now. What kind of intellectual engagement does Mixtape have? What does the player have to understand? What does the player have to think in order to avoid the failure state and reach the victory state? If your answer is nothing, you are correct. I will allow you to grade your own papers today. Please give yourself a thick, fat 100. Next, let's ask, what kind of mechanical engagement does Mixtape have? What mechanical inputs must the player perform in order to avoid the failure state and reach the victory state? I would like to hear your answers now. If your answer is absolutely nothing, unfortunately, that's not correct. There are some inputs which the player must perform, but these inputs are superficial. They are not connected to the rules of the game, nor are the inputs connected to any kind of intellectual engagement. The buttons, the mechanical engagement that the player is required to actually progress the software title are just displayed on screen. So technically, a monkey or a parrot would be able to play this software title. So if you answered nothing, unfortunately, you do not earn a thick, fat 100. Instead, you may give yourself an 85, which is not that bad. In terms of mechanical engagement, Mixtape is weak because the mechanical engagement that it does have is not connected to the intellectual engagement, and it is not something that the player can actually become good at. They're simply following a prompt on screen the same way that you would navigate a DVD menu. So, let's discuss. Mixtape has no established rules. It has no way for the user to engage on an intellectual level, no way to gain proficiency, no way to be good or bad at following the rules and performing mechanical engagement. There is no way to understand what the game expects the player to do. And this brings us to our third and final type of engagement, and that is emotional engagement. This type of engagement is less tangible than the first two. In the past and decades past, emotional engagement was used to enhance the overall experience. In the 2010s and 20s, emotional engagement is used as a total replacement for intellectual and mechanical engagement. It is used as a way to manipulate an audience into thinking they are having a positive experience. In essence, it is a brain hack. In general, this approach to game design is employed by people that do not have a competent and full understanding of game development and design philosophies. The core experience of Mixtape relies entirely on emotional engagement that is entirely unearned. It uses the idea of 90s nostalgia, and it uses vintage music that people know and already like. And this is unearned emotional engagement, and unearned emotional engagement is manipulation. Those are the topics that we have to discuss today. I hope you have found this digestible and useful to you. We will now assign the homework. Please find the download form for the homework in the description. In the homework, I want you to fill this form out for 2 games of your choosing. So pick 2 games. I want you to identify and describe the failure state and the victory state for those 2 games. Are there minor failure states? Are there major failure states? Please identify and describe that. Next, I want you to identify and describe the intellectual engagement and the mechanical engagement of those 2 games that you picked. Next, identify and describe the value of input. Really, all you must say is, does this have high value of input, or does it have low value of input? Maybe it has moderate value of input, and why does it have that value? And lastly, identify and describe the value of visuals. Does this have high value of visuals or low value of visuals, and why? That is the homework for today. You don't have to do the homework, but you will not be earning points if you don't do the homework. And that is an example of a minor failure. Thank you. I appreciate you attending class today. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Please look forward to our next session at Sungrand University. Be well.